So hello everyone, for our next session we have Varun who would be speaking on GRC Engineering. So if you have any questions you can put it up on Slido, and we will be taking those questions at the end of the session. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for the quick introduction, Karthik. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining in at 1:30 p.m. on a Sunday after lunch. It's not easy, I know. And just so that you know, these seats recline. So if you want a post-lunch nap, you can recline those and I won't judge you. And if it's GRC, so you can nap it out. Anyways, before I get started, I want a quick poll of the audience. How many of you here are from the security engineering, software engineering, IR, incident response, and all that crazy stuff? Okay. How many of you are from the GRC, governance, risk compliance background? Nice. I'm glad you care about this. How many of you all work for a vendor? Cool. Nice. Thank you. And how many of you all are here because Theater 13 was already full? All right. Cool. So let's get started. So we'll be talking about three broad topics in the presentation. I'll be focusing on the bottom two for the most of the part. We'll be talking about the challenges in GRC and why do they exist. And then we'll be talking about GRC engineering, which is an engineering approach to solving those problems. And then the audit engine, which is how you can solve those problems using engineering approaches. Little about me. I'm a security engineer in San Francisco. I started off my technology journey with writing iOS and Android apps in my undergrad. And then my first job was doing vendor security audits. So when you put a software engineer into doing ISO vendor audits, life just is not fun. And if you've done these before, you know how it is. It's just a painful process. So I quit that job and I went to get my master's here in the US. And after that, I started working in a security engineer AppSec role at Zendesk and Robinhood. While I was doing that, I saw a lot of traction being picked up in the compliance automation space. Startups got great funding, so that means the market was validating these, was accepting these ideas. And besides accepting this talk is a testament to the market being open to putting automation in front of GRC. So I pivoted my career to solving GRC problems. And my goal in my near career is to actually help engineers hate compliance less. And I get a smirk when I say that in an internal audit meeting. And engineers are like, yeah, whatever, like you do you, man. Just a quick disclaimer, I'm not here representing my employer. This is not what we do at my employer's place. And I'm here on my own time on time. It's a Sunday, so it's my time. Cool. So GRC, it's a pretty broad topic. Mostly goes unnoticed in a lot of security practices. And it's GRC, so it's three words right on the slide. Governance is a team and a practice which does a lot of policies and procedures. Risk is a function which will ensure that security and business things that happen in these places don't stop the business from achieving their goals and their objectives. And lastly, compliance, the favorite of all of us, is adherence to laws and frameworks. And in this talk, I'll be focusing on the last part. I will not be talking about GR for the most of the part. And you'll see why I'm saying that. So compliance, it's a function in a company which can range from finance to security. And coming to a security conference and a security background, I care about the security compliance part of it. Whatever I say and speak in this talk can also apply to any compliance you can care about. Lately, AI compliance, I don't know if you've seen the ISO 42001. It's a fun framework, and every single organization will come up with their own AI security framework, so brace yourselves for that. Anyway, so compliance, security compliance in specifically, does a lot of things, right? It helps with sales. So if you are a B2B SaaS, right up to an enterprise company that sells a firewall or a logging service at an enterprise scale, you need a compliance function to actually make a sale. So finance is incentivized to have this function. Compliance also helps in getting down your fines. So in compliance, a lot of like privacy frameworks, you need this function to bring down the fines. And then of course, complying with the latest frameworks like ISO and PCI, NIST, right? All these things require somebody to focus on it. All these frameworks I mentioned right now, NIST, SOC 2, PCI, HIPAA, they're 60-70% the same. They overlap. And the challenge that the compliance team faces is that these frameworks have certain nuances that come out in something called as gap assessment. So the compliance team has to work through each framework and see what is the nuanced part of this framework. For example, like FedRAMP will focus a lot on how you do vulnerability management, right? And PCI will focus on, okay, how do you segment your guarded environment from the other parts of your company? And the best part is that people come to compliance with demands. Like people will come and ask the compliance team to do a lot of things. Imagine you are compliance, all of you from various parts of security are now a compliance team for this conversation and for this talk. So best of luck. And let's see what happens when people come to compliance. Legal will come and say, hey, we have GDPR, and please make sure that we follow the rules of GDPR, that you'll have a 4% fine on it. Your finance compliance will come and say, hey, we have SOX. So if you want to be on the stock exchange, do your financial reporting well, don't be the next Enron, so you have to do SOX. Then your board of directors will come and say, hey, we found this fancy ass framework and called the NIST CSF, and how do we compare with that? And then lastly, your sales team will come and say, how do we sell this? We need a SOC 2, so please help us bring in SOC 2. So compliance team will actually interface with all these fun people in the company who ask them various things, but the compliance team does not have access, or I would say does not have the capability to actually get the answers without interacting with other people in the company. So they act like a program management function, which goes and talks to different people and get the answers to put it in the framework language. So broadly, compliance focuses on two aspects, two work streams. Achieving compliance. So how do you get compliant with these frameworks and regulatory standards? And then audits. So every 6 months or a year, depending on the cadence of the framework, you have to show up and perform an audit, and then you have to support the audit. So let's talk about achieving compliance in the first place. Let's assume that you are in the compliance team of a B2B SaaS company, and you have a new product coming out which sends SMSs via an API endpoint. Pretty standard, sounds familiar, right? And you need a SOC 2 for this. You're a smaller company needing a SOC 2 for a new product. How do you go about doing this? You have a kickoff meeting with people who you want to address this to, so sales, engineering, leadership, product. Then you do a gap assessment. So what you have in your existing security controls versus what does the new framework want, you do a gap assessment. And then you tell the teams to fill those gaps. And this is a fun ask because teams don't want to listen to people, right? Nobody wants to listen to anybody. So you remediate the gaps, then you test those gaps, and then you go for the certification. And you get your fancy SOC 2 certification or whatever you go for. Now, the season comes around, season changes, and one more part. So you interface with people when you do these 5 steps. So engineering, legal, and internal audit will be in the kickoff part, product in the gap assessment part of the product per se, and then engineering will be in the remediation part. They need to see what security controls were not in place and what do we need to put in place. So engineering comes right there. And then the season changes and the audit period comes around. And then, again, you have a kickoff meeting. You do a pre-assessment. We need to go into an audit. Let's see what the auditors will potentially ask for and do a pre-assessment. And then the audit cycle comes around, and then auditors will ask you to sample stuff. So you have some samples that you'll have to test against. And the validation happens, and then you close the audit. While doing this, you interact with engineering, legal, internal audit, in the pre-assessment phase, you ask engineers are you prepared for this audit? You don't want to hear the answer to that, but mostly it's like, we don't know. Nobody knows. And then you do sampling, you go back to engineering and say, hey, we received these samples from our external auditor. We need to get stuff for this particular sample. And then again, validation part of it is by engineering, part of it is by compliance. And then you close the audit with legal internal audit. Now, all this is good, but if you see a common theme, right, you are interfacing with engineering teams a lot. And here's what I want to talk about. I know I said you were going to be compliant for this talk. For this slide, assume you're an engineering function in that company. As an engineering function, as an engineer, as a software engineer on that team, you need to move fast. You need to ship product. You need to fix software bugs. If you're a smaller SMB, you have latest business needs that your CEO, your director of engineering asks you to ship. If you're a larger, big tech company, it's going to be mostly scaling up things and being on call, fixing bugs. So you're already pretty busy with a lot of things. And security is also an extra thing that happens to be on your plate. Depending on the organization, security is prioritized at the top or at the top 5 things that they need to do. But again, it's an extra thing, right? You're not incentivized, or your performance bonus is not based on how many security bugs you squash until you're a security team. And then compliance team will come to you and say, hey, we need your help for this achieving compliance phase and then your audit phase. And you're like, come on, man, this is not what I wanted to do. I don't want to support compliance audits. That's not what I want to do as part of my job. So you have to context switch every single time compliance comes to you. And that's a pain. And nobody likes pain. So engineers don't like compliance. And on the compliance side, they have too many frameworks to keep up with. Audits, the audit calendar is full. So you have to keep on supporting audits. You are already disliked by engineering teams because you have given them extra work. And then that leads to software engineers and engineering teams gatekeeping information from you. And that leads to reduced security hygiene. And obviously, you're creating compliance gaps. This is a culture problem. So what do we do? How do we actually address this problem? And what we came up with, I've been thinking of this for a while, and how do we fix this? Something called as GRC Engineering. That's the topic of this presentation. And you can achieve GRC Engineering as a function in 2 ways. You can get your compliance people to do some basic scripting, or you can find some software engineer who truly cares about compliance, somebody like myself who actually can bail you out of these smaller problems, right? And the goal of GRC engineering is to actually make engineers hate compliance less. That's the focus of it. So it's an engineering-focused discipline where you want compliance people to interface less with engineers when it comes to supporting audits, right? And since I have the word engineering in this title, we need to ship some stuff. You can't be an engineering title and not ship product, right? Or you cannot ship non-code stuff. This is not like a spreadsheet that's going to be a part of your work. It's going to be legit code. So what do we build? As an engineering function, what do we build here? We build on 2 main philosophies. Either you support the compliance team or you support the product and engineering team. And you do that by either doing audit tooling or you do compliance enablement. So compliance enablement, I'll get into what it is, but this talk will be focused on audit tooling. So compliance enablement is going to be a way in which you bake in compliance-y stuff into your infrastructure. I'll give you an example. Any small company or a large enterprise has some kind of Kubernetes deployment, right? And Kubernetes has something called as the controllers part. So you can have tooling consumed from your Kube API server or your Kube audit logs, and then push that into reports that look audit friendly. This is not rocket science. It already happens in other disciplines of security, but you need to find a way in which you can have engineers write a small tool which can sit into your Kubernetes cluster and get logging information from your kube audit logging, and then pump that into an audit-ready artifact, as in spit out a PDF file or a spreadsheet that the compliance team will love. So that's what I call the compliance enablement tooling. Every infra part like Kubernetes or Spinnaker or GitHub has different architectures. So you need a person who has a skill to go into these systems and build out this compliance tooling. It's hard, it's not easy, but you need the right person, the right motivation to do this. In this talk, I'll focus on audit tooling. Now, what is audit tooling? Audit tooling is a way in which you help the compliance team first because they are backlogged. And you do that by building stuff in a way that you pull from different systems and then you prepare audit-ready artifacts. You can do this in two modes. But before I do that, I want to talk about an important part. Just give me a small water break. Compliance is old, but it has changed in the past 5 years. There are many companies and startups that promise you a SOC 2 for a very inexpensive price. There are many such tools. If you walk upstairs or go to RSA, you'll find a bunch of them. You drive down 101 South, you'll see a bunch of those ads on the billboards. And they're honestly great. I don't hate them. In fact, I love them. I love those vendor tools because they have actually solved the problem for smaller enterprises. So I recommend using those tools if you are a company of a certain type and size. So if you're a SaaS shop, you're completely deployed on a cloud-first infrastructure. You have cloud-based tooling. You have all B2B SaaS products you use to run your company. They will work great for you. Your entire infrastructure is deployed on a public cloud, which has APIs. Perfect. If you have an on-prem deployment, it won't work for you. Your engineering team has one single way of doing a thing. Think about patch management, right? If you have a very variety of infra components, patching is harder. If you just have EC2 instances, patching is much easier. So if you're a smaller shop with a smaller blast radius, these vendor tools will work perfectly great for you. And if you're just a new GRC function, just get them to work for when you begin building your team, and they'll work perfectly off the ground for you. Also, let's focus on when they don't work for you. You're a large enterprise. When I say large, even if you're like a 5,000 person, 10,000 person company, in which you have multiple engineering teams that depend on custom tooling, you will have to do your own stuff. You have a large cloud deployment, on-prem stuff, and you have seen a GRC tool that acts as a glorified ticketing system, then this vendor tools might not work for you. Okay, coming back to audit tooling. So there are two modes in which it can operate. The easy mode, the hard mode. Let's talk about each one of them in this slide. So easy mode. This is a way for you to show quick value to in an organization. Very easy. Pick a control that takes too much time, either to operate or to validate. Write a basic Python script, and then you show value. App.py file, maximum 15 lines. You learn it from ChatGPT, and you basically do it. Let's look at a quick example. Let's say you're doing vulnerability management, and these are criteria it kind of follows. And on the right, I've just written kind of a pseudo code script which keeps your SLAs as integers, and then you have a check SLA function which just checks if the due date and the current date time is the right way. So to check for SLAs is going to be super easy, right? Because you can just do this. Instead of doing this, you historically would go to the engineers and ask them to pull those tickets and do this manual checks in spreadsheet. You write this one script and you're golden. So this is like a quick value proposition for you. In a hard mode, you actually pick a control area like change, patch, access management. That's actually a pain point for many people. And then you actually go and build the audit engine. Okay, this is the hard part, the audit engine. Audit engine is a backend service that does the entire audit heavy lifting for you. It needs two things to be successful. You need to have a list of all controls, and you need to have a list of all applications that your compliance controls depend on. This you won't find in non-mature GRC function. You need to be a really mature function to have this kind of maturity to go for the audit engine. Okay, what are the requirements for doing this? Let's look at one by one. You need an interface to store all your controls, or a way to pull from an existing GRC tool. So if you use an existing GRC tool which has all of your controls, just hook it up with that and you're golden. You need an interface to actually keep a track of all your scopes. So if you are in scope for ISO, SOC 2, PCI, HIPAA, a way to store all that scope in a database. And then that's how it looks like, right? You have that's more of a, how do you create a table in SQL? And you have the sampling details in a JSON blob, and you have the audit start date, the end date. So you're keeping track of the scope of the audits. And then you need a way to, map your controls to your application. So if you have an HR application, you have connectors to that HR app. So that's in a ChexDB. So all these black boxes are going to be CRUD applications. When I say we need an interface, because you don't expect GRC people to actually go and write the code. So you as a GRC engineer need to go and build those CRUD applications which can actually handle these things. Going further, we're going to build out system design as we go through talking about each requirement. So the controls home talks to these two pieces, ScopeDB and ChexDB. Okay. Since we have multiple systems for one control area, we need a way to accommodate the complexity. So we need a serializer. We need a way to trigger the audits. We need a way to meet our continuous compliance needs. Continuous compliance is a nice buzzword. Essentially, it's just a for loop. You keep running it, or it's a cron job. You keep running it multiple times. Every Monday, 10 a.m., do it. That's continuous compliance for you. We need a way for us to chain different applications in order to satisfy the need of one particular control. And that's going to be done by the integration middleware. Let's look at how these two fit in together. Assume that you have, let's talk about one part of this entire diagram. Look at the vulnerability management serializer in the center. You have different teams. Different teams in engineering use different vulnerability scanners. You have 5 different scanners because on the period of the past 5 years, you bought all of them. And all of them work in some way, but they don't work together. And for the audit, you need the reports from everything, right? So you chain them together, and the serializer will kind of have a common way to pull the data out from these scanners, and then you pump that into your middleware. Let's look at the access management serializer. This is a sample from GitHub and from a KH logging system. That's how I feel your dictionary should look like. If you look at the top, it has the user dictionary, and there is an access list. So no matter you use GitHub, you use KH, or you use Spinnaker, you use like Postgres, you use anything else in your infra, you can just serialize that data into one specific way in order to consume it in one specific schema. So you're defining the schemas here for your serializer. Okay, so just pumping it in. So on the right side, we have the scope and ChexDB, and this time we plugged in the integration middleware and the serializer, which pumps to the audit engine. Okay, and we also have these 3 new things. This is more of a system design concept where you have an API server to handle all the traffic. You also have a web interface to interact, to give a UI to your compliance team and your senior leadership, where they can see how you can actually interact with these audits. So trigger audits, continuous compliance, status checks, metrics, all the measurement stuff that leadership loves to hear. You can bake it into the web interface. Then you also have a worker in which you can generate reports. So you have a dedicated compute and data store for generating and storing these reports. And that actually, wraps up your system design for the audit engine. And the engine can operate in 2 different modes. I call it the audit period mode and the continuous compliance mode. So if you look at the audit period mode, that's like you trigger one audit at one time, and then you can go sequentially through, pulling the sampling from scopes DB, then you pull the data from integrations, scope with the sample, perform the audit, and generate reports. And this happens all in the back end, right? And if anything fails, you want to resample, it's just a new arrow, right? You have to connect two systems and trigger it in the same way. You don't have to reach out to the engineering team again, resample, set meetings, piss them off. No, you just do it in one interface. As I said, continuous compliance, it's a buzzword, right? Essentially, you move the arrow around. So if you have all these parts built out, you can play with how you do compliance. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's go through the summary. And so we first looked at the challenges for compliance, too many frameworks disliked by engineering teams. We looked at the engineering part, the engineering problem that engineers face. Compliance gives them more work. And then why vendor tools might not work for you, because you're too huge and you have custom tooling for them to be used. And then audit tooling. You have two ways to do it. The easy way to get buy-in from your bosses and your leadership to do GRC engineering. And then if you have the investment and you have the motivation, you can go for the hard mode and build the audit engine out. And GRC engineering is a rocket ship to fixing your compliance and engineering problems. And in the final way, we built out the system design for this. So yeah, that concludes my talk. Are we on time?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we have 4 minutes left. Are there any questions that are on Slido?
Nothing as of now. I put one on there.
Okay.
I can also ask. Sure. Yeah.
You want a mic?
I can just say it.
Okay.
And I'll try to say it louder. So a lot of what you're talking about makes me think of in the last decade, how we saw the rise of DevOps, right? And kind of introducing reliability in the development lifecycle process, and you have all the other iterations that kind of come from that. Do you think that there's some lesson to learn here in terms as we kind of build out this idea of GRC engineering? Is there something in other words, is there some ownership or some principles you think that you should take to a normal software engineer that can make this process a lot smoother?
So I know you mentioned DevOps, and then it became DevSecOps. And then if I say, if I would have submitted a talk with the title DevSecCompOps, it wouldn't be fun. So I don't think, if we have compliance as a separate engineering function, I think it's easier to scale up and scale down. If we try getting software engineers to do, hey, you do software engineering, you ship product, you fix bugs, you be on call, you patch your systems for security, and by the way, we have an ISO audit coming up, and I need you to do this. No, with any software engineer I've talked to, they are not happy supporting compliance stuff. So I'm like, okay, fine. You know what? We'll build a parallel function, and we'll do it for you, and we'll do it for compliance as well. So I would love to find software engineers who are willing to take on compliance in their sprints. But yeah, I don't find people motivated enough to do that. So yeah, thank you for your question. Anybody else who has a question that they want to ask? Okay, awesome. That was perfect then. Oh, you have one. Perfect.
What's the frequency of the mini audits or the evidence collection that you would recommend setting it to?
So it depends on, typical answer, it depends on your compliance need. If you're just doing SOC 2, it's once in 6 months. I think if you're doing PCI, it's once a year, and then SOX is at every earnings. Again, SOX is also biannual. So you can set it up you can have a lever or a gear, and you can set it up depending on your cadence. I would say do it every morning at 10 a.m. What's the harm? It doesn't take much compute anyway. And it achieves your continuous compliance needs. If you have an audit coming up next week, you don't have anxiety for it. So compliance people have a lot of anxiety, right? Because you don't know what's going to hit the fan. So.
coming up with a structure rather than just putting it on a Google
Yes, I have built those things out. And personally, I come from a software engineering background, so I go towards using Prometheus and custom tooling. But I think you can build things out of like, Tableau dashboards, basic stuff, right? Or any logging or dashboarding tool. Data warehouses will work great once you have a lot of compliance data underneath it, and you will become a compliance data lake in the future. And by the way, that's a segue. Once you have a data lake of data in compliance, you can use AI, right? I did not mention AI anywhere because I don't think it's the right time for compliance to do AI at this point of time for the maturity we have in compliance as an industry. But there are people who are doing it, and it works great for big enterprises who have a compliance data lake. But to answer your question, there's nothing open sourced. But I know people who are working on open sourcing stuff. So keep a track of what advancements are coming up in GRC engineering. You'll find something soon. And I think we're on time. So
do you have thoughts about putting it in a time series database for every single commit in a repository?
I think your version control will track all of that for pull requests and commits and merges.
Compliance ledger.
You already have that, right, in terms of your audit logging from every tool you build out. And once you have this entire system design up, you will have logging components within this for your own compliance stuff. So yeah, you will by de facto get those things for free once you go for a system design like that.
Okay, guys, thank you so much, and let's have a round of applause for Varun. And if someone has any other questions, you guys can chat on the city view. So because we have to continue with our schedule, and we have another presentation coming up in 10 minutes.
If
Thank
you
you.
want to talk to me on LinkedIn, just hit me up. Thank you.